Okay, thank you, everyone. Everybody knows each other. So let's go now with the presentation from Dr. Domenico Rossetti. Welcome again, Domenico. So you have...
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Y antes de todo, muchísimas gracias, profesora Iglesias, por acogernos aquí en La Coruña, que hoy no es el fin de la tierra, es el centro de Europa, el corazón de Europa, cuando veo todos que somos aquí. Y muchísimas gracias también de hacernos posible aprovechar de vuestra ciudad, que es tan bonita, no suficientemente conocida, pero tan bonita y que merece una visita y de vuelta para volver no solamente con colegas, pero también con familias y amigos, aprovechando de esta ciudad tan bonita. Muchísimas gracias. Professor Ricardo Garcia Mira, I have really to congratulate you and to thank you so much for making this meeting possible. It was not a milestone, it was not a deliverable, but you are all there. At the beginning it was 3 projects, then 4 projects, then 5 projects, 6. Now I have counted 9 plus 1, if I well understood. 9 FP7 plus 1 from Horizon 2020. And this is really the philosophy of the new framework program, to go beyond the silos, to cross the barriers among disciplines, cross the barriers among programs, and really take benefit from the experience, from the expertise, from the theoretical backgrounds of colleagues coming from all around Europe. And then thank you so much. Congratulations for your excellent ideas. Congratulations for your perfect management. This is highly, highly appreciated. Thank you, obviously, to all the team of Ricardo, Adina, and all the colleagues for making this meeting possible. Highly, highly appreciated. Let me also thank all my hierarchy. I will not go into details, but Peter Dreul and Elisabeth Lipiato are strongly in favor and promote social science and humanities. We have, as you probably know, in Horizon 2020, the Societal Challenge 6 on inclusive, innovative, and reflective societies. But we are also pushing a lot for embedding SSH, integrate the aspects of social science and humanities within the different thematic priority in the different programs. And that's typically the case today, where we see that social science and environment have a lot to do together. Then also thanks to my project officer colleagues, which cannot be there, Ugo Guarnacci, I think he's managing 3 projects, and my colleague Yuri Borgman-Prebil for transit. I think that my 2 colleagues are also very keen to these synergies. And last preliminary remark, yesterday there was a beautiful speech, maybe not sufficiently promoted in the first television. Jean-Claude Juncker, the President of the Commission, made the State of the Union in Strasbourg in front of the member of the Parliament, in front of the people of Europe. And he made a speech about honesty, solidarity, and humanity. If you had not the opportunity to listen to this speech, I think that you can read the text on all the different websites. He made the point that there is not enough Europe in the Union, and there is not enough Union in this European Union. And I think that these 2 concepts are very important at this moment. We had many discussions about the Greece case some months ago. Now the refugee are obviously a main question, and that's the moment probably where Europe can, from a crisis, to go ahead and to sortir la tête haute, to go out with the head, not speaking about decline of Europe, not speaking about Europe which is not à la hauteur, but really a Europe that make solidarity and humanity as a first element. Ladies and gentlemen, that was just my preliminary remark. I have half an hour of speech. If maybe I can ask to Alberto to move the slides. The title is Towards a European Socio-ecological Transition. It's a broad title. Then I hope that you will follow a little bit the line. When we speak about sustainability transitions, it's never easy to find where is the A and where is the Z. The subject is so large. I will try to do so, inspiring myself from several projects, several publications that we did at the Commission, like Global Europe, Sustainable Urban Dynamics, The World in 2025, and other activity on forward-looking activity. In the next slide, you can see when we speak about forward-looking, I'm very enthusiastic, because to study the past is extremely important, and we have many historians which make that perfectly. And to look forward, it's the most difficult. And I think that one of the tasks of the scientist is to try to go ahead, to look what can happen, what could happen, how can we shape the future. There are different methods to look at these future-related activities. On the top right, you see the foresight and vision. There is all a school of thinking about foresight, which allow to try to tackle the issue of socio-political wide scope. Are, for example, the religious factor becoming more and more important in the future, or less and less important? And that's really the kind of activities that the foresight, the visionary people are doing. Then on the bottom on the left, you have the forecasting and modeling. Many colleagues dealing with climate change knows well what I'm speaking about, is the different, when we make the different targets for climate change, for energy efficiency, for renewable, we need to have some kind of forecasting and modeling. And that's really expert-based, it's more quantitative, and it's tried really to tackle the issue from a techno-economic problem-solving approach. Then these are just to show you when we look ahead. I will try to speak a little bit about the different trends. And when you look at many trends today, they are unsustainable. That seems obvious. I've just taken 3 or 4 slides to illustrate that. The first one is a world of storms where inequalities are very strong. Governance gap, you can see the debate between citizens and policymakers. Then we have the global problem, but with a weak multilateral system. We have the climate change and the systemic economic crisis. I think that's just a few elements which show how we are living in a world of storms. Another element, which is also very clear, but I think that this graph is very synthetic. In relation to the past, in the 60s, the share of non-renewable were higher than the renewable since the 60s. That was really the cross point. And also the share of rural people versus urban people. That was 2008, where you got more than 50% of the people living in cities rather than in rural area. And I think that this shows very clearly 2 main challenges for the world, and I will obviously insist more on Europe in the next part of my presentation. The global resource extraction. Today, almost 70 billion tons are extracted for minerals, biomass, metal, or fossil fuels, and this share is continuing. Although we are making progress in energy efficiency, in energy saving, although we are in some part of the world taking a lot of measures, there is a new way of consuming, new way of producing, but nevertheless, the global resource extraction are increasing more and more. A very strong unsustainable trend is the humanitarian crisis, the question of migrants, the question of refugees, and that was one of the main elements of the speech of Jean-Claude Juncker yesterday in Strasbourg. In 2014, we had the highest number of people forcibly displaced. People can be displaced in their own countries, but people are also going to other countries. And when you see some reactions in some countries, where instead of opening the arms and taking into account what happens to many Europeans in the First or the Second World War, we always should remind that the refugee status is coming mostly from Europe, because Europeans were trying to escape from dictatorships, and then today we have in some countries walls which are built instead of taking into account the memory and the history. There is a very nice sentence from Jean Monnet, apologize, it's in French, les hommes n'acceptent le changement que dans la nécessité, et ils ne voient la nécessité que dans la crise. This could be also like a trampoline, like a positive element. In the crisis, maybe we could have a jump in more European integration, in more union. Another unsustainable trend is the local versus the global risks. Some colleagues in one of the projects that we could have invited from New Jobs show clearly that more there is an increasing in wealth, more the community and the local risks are decreasing. This is quite important when you speak about dirty water, urban pollution. These factors have tendency to decrease, while the global risks are clearly increasing. And when you look at these global risks, I see one which is very important, which is the next slide. It's the inequalities. I've just taken some figure from a paper from Alvaredo, Atkinson, and Piketty, where they show the percentage of income owned by the top 1%. In the US, the top 1% has almost 20% of the income. That's the US situation. Then we have some other countries that they have analyzed, Argentina, South Africa, and UK, but this is not clearly sustainable. This picture that you can see from Sao Paulo, there is probably a tennis player in the room. In Sao Paulo, from one side of the, I'm not sure that it's a wall, I never went there, but you can see from one side, on the right side, you have a building with private swimming pool. We're not so used to that in Europe. Private swimming pool on every floor. And you have tennis court, a couple of tennis courts downstairs, and they have a landscape on the favelas. And if you will be extremely cynical, which I'm not, you will say that in the favelas they have a better landscape. But I think that these kind of inequalities are tremendous. And we had always over history inequalities, but now the inequalities are close to the door, really one close to the other. And I think that this is dramatically increasing. Some other unsustainable evidence. For Europe, a car is parked 92% of its life cycle. This is also good to remind, to put a figure sometime, it's nice to have. If you like horse riding, which I'm liking a lot, the average speed of an international freight train in the EU is slower than a horse. And we are speaking about intermodality, you know, that we should have different modes which collaborate, cars, trains, trucks, airplane, boats. But when you look at the average speed of an international freight train, you can see why the freight trains are not so developed. 18 kilometers per hour. This is horse speed. The EU energy bill, which amounted to 300 billion in 2014, it's also good to remind, this kind of bill, it's a bill that we can easily reduce, and we can use it for more clever purpose, most probably. And the EU is importing 55% of its energy needs, not always from the more, let's say, countries where we share more values. And I think that that's also important to mention. Another very important and sustainable trends are the so-called needs. We have a country almost big as the Netherlands, 14 million people in Europe, which are not in employment, neither in education, neither in training. Then you have 14 million, again, it's a figure of people who can say, but what these people are doing in their life. They are not in employment, neither in education, neither in training. And I think that this is really a very important element for the next generation when you have this size of young Europeans aged between 15 and 29 years which are in this situation. The youth unemployment, it's also a major challenge. I think that President Juncker could have spoken also about this issue more in depth, but the question of refugee and migrants is obviously on the first page of the newspaper, but the question of youth unemployment in countries like Greece, Spain, Croatia, more than 50% of the young are unemployed. More than 1 out of 2 young people is unemployed. I've taken another issue, which maybe we will discuss later today and tomorrow, is the called urban sprawl. When you speak about urban sprawl, generally people give you a picture of Las Vegas. It's a typical example of urban sprawl. I just take, because I was in Spain, but I'm on the Atlantic coast, not in the Mediterranean coast. I take a Mediterranean coast of Spain, where the urban sprawl, really it's increasing very largely with all its consequences, where you have urban sprawl. Most of the time you have only car as a way to move. When you have urban sprawl, it's not efficient in terms of energy. When you have urban sprawl, this creates a lot of social link, which is lost. I often said in the suburbs, where is the piazza of the suburb? Most of the time, the piazza, the place where people, the public place, where people can meet, can encounter, can discuss, can debate together. In the suburb, most of the time, you don't have a piazza. You don't have a center. You don't have a public space where people can meet. Fortunately, we are in La Coruña, where there is a beautiful piazza, where we hope this night to be able to exchange in a very informal way. Let me give you in the second part of my presentation some emerging awareness and consciousness. I think it's also, the first part was more negative. You should come back home and say, and cry and say, this is very bad, it's going not very well in Europe. But I will try to give you some elements where I think it's, we have some hope. The first point, you may be astonished. The 7th European Environmental Action Programme, you will not be astonished that I'm quoting. This is a Commission key document for the future. But I would like also to quote Pope Francis in this encyclical letter. Since 20th century, I did not get any encyclical letter on the relation between what Pope Francis called our notre maison mère, our home to everybody. And he spoke about the integral ecology, which include the social dimension and the ecological dimension, which are the two dimensions of sustainable development which are very often poorly addressed. Then I leave you with these quotations, which certainly deserve to be read. We are, in the next slide, you can see that Europe, when you heard about people speaking about the EU decline, the figures are confirming this relative decline. Just take the population. In 1950, the European Union has a population higher than India. We don't remember that. In the 50s, in the European Union, the current European Union, if you imagine the European Union of 28 member states, in the 50s it was not exactly the same configuration, but if you take the same geographical area, we were more inhabitants in Europe than in India. And they put close the figures that we expect for 2050. We expect to have 1.7 billion people in India, and around, still almost stable, just some millions more in the European Union. Then more than 3 times smaller than India. Then you have a shrinking in demographic term. You have a shrinking in economic term. If you take the share of GDP at the world level, the European Union represented 37% in 1970, and it most probably will represent, let's say, between 15 and 20%. Nobody can speak exactly about the figures for 2050 with the crisis that could occur, but that's a good ordre de grandeur which may help. When we speak about CO2 emissions, in 2000, I'm not speaking about 70s, I'm speaking about 2000, the European Union represented 14% of the CO2 emissions. By 2050, the European Union will only represent 8% of the CO2 emission. That does not mean that we should not have a role as a key leader in this issue. But alone, obviously, we will only represent a marginal part of the emission. I'm in Spain. I would just to quote a sentence from the González report, which is a very nice foresight report with Lech Walesa from Poland, let's say the former head of state and government. And he made this very nice sentence. Europe is at the crossroads. Either we keep and strengthen the role as one of the main global actors, or we become an increasingly irrelevant outgrowth on the Asian continent. And in fact, you see La Coruña, where we are, in this map, that we're not used to see this map. I'm also thinking to my Irish colleagues, which are looking at this map. You see that really, if we are not more united, this sentence is very important. There is not enough Europe in this union, and there is not enough union in our European Union. That were the sentence of Jean-Claude Juncker yesterday. What are the reason for hope? Some new realities. We have a nexus among energy, environment, transport, land use, which is more and more strong. We have more interface among this issue. We have an improvement in collaboration among sectors and policies, but still many compartments and silos. It's one of the few meetings over the last 10 years where I see projects from different programs joining together the forces, and I think that's really the future. We need to improve the environmental performance of firms, of products or services, and we have to take care of the small consumers. If you look at the statistics, the transport and households, that means you and me, we are increasing more our energy consumption than the large consumers, which are the steel companies, the cement company, the electrical power plants, which are decreasing their consumption. While we, as a small consumer, we're increasing our consumption almost every day. And a lot has to be done on human and social behaviors, and I'm very glad to be here to hear many of your conclusions, of your research results over these 2 days. Also, a reason of hope, this is the relations between the food function, how long people spend in order to get food, to eat. And you can see that in Europe, we spend around 3 hours a day for the food function. You make shopping, you go to buy your salad, you go to buy your potatoes, your pasta, and so on. You cook it and you eat. That's around 3 hours per day. In some other country, if you take South Asia or even China, it's almost 6 hours per day to this food function. And here we put together engineers and sociologists to see what could be. You know, in the future, nobody knows how the geopolitical frame will be. But we are almost sure that the day and the night will continue to be 24 hours. I know that there will be a presentation on this issue of time use. But the time use, according to most of the experts, there will be more and more time dedicated to information. Information, maybe reading your newspaper, reading your Twitter, informing yourself, discussing with the colleague. Then the information will take more and more place. And we will be, at the end of the century, in most places of the world, spending between 5 and 6 hours per day, 4, 5, 6 hours per day for the information. It could be on the radio, it could be newspaper, it could be many new social media, but the information function. In some country will be, in Europe, in the US, in Russia, it will be around 5 hours, 6 hours, which is not negligible. But this is kind of new element versus, for example, the food function. What are the evolving regimes? There was a very nice project that I had the pleasure to look at, Polinares. They made what are the evolving regimes. And then they look at history. They say there was an imperial liberalism at the end of the 90s. Then we had mercantilism and war economy between and with the 2 world wars. Then we had state interventionism and socialism between 1945 and 1980. And then some people said we had, it was the Reagan-Thatcher time, the liberal capitalism. With the financial crisis of 2008, they tried to find, is it now the winner? Is it the state capitalism? Obviously, they had China in mind. That's what they say. I try to say, are we going towards a sustainable civilization where use of resources are taken care, where we will have global governance of global problems? If you think to migration and climate change, it's 2 examples which need a global answer. It's not enough. European Union, it's not enough to solve this issue. And that's the kind of elements that we should consider if we look at the medium to long term. We will speak a lot today and tomorrow about values and lifestyles. This is a very nice picture from Pablo Picasso. You know that I'm very lucky, my wife is Spanish, then I'm also, very much integrated in the Spanish world. This is Pablo Picasso, Les Femmes d'Alger. This painting has been sold, I think, Christie's $179 million a couple of weeks ago. Then people are ready to pay $179 million to have the Pablo Picasso, probably in a Swiss bank. I'm not sure that they will put on the wall. And that's my 3 children, Alessandro, Maria, and Pablo, at La Saint-Schumann, the 9th of May. And I was thinking what I prefer, to stay with my 3 children or to look at Picasso. I'm not an amateur, a special amateur of Picasso, but in terms of price, I think that we have to take into account these elements, the values that we give to some things. In the beyond GDP perspective, what is the value for having a secure, cohesive environment, for example? When you go in some cities, you understand what is the value of having a secure, safe, healthy, peaceful environment. If you are in the center of Mexico, in the center of Johannesburg, you can feel these kind of elements that I'm just quoting. When I speak about values and lifestyles, this is the only car that I have. It's not the big one on the top, it's the small one. Fiat 500 1957 sport model, which is very nice. I can bring my 3 children with this car and to bring them out. But I'm not so, when I see the new 500, when I see the new Mini, when I see the new Beetle, I'm not sure that we are in this perspective. You have cars which have a weight of more than 1 ton, the new Mini, the new 500, the new beetle. And I think that the sustainable lifestyles, it's also this, to try to educate people, and I'm very glad to be in the education faculty, educate people to what is important and not. Most of the transport in Europe, the average transport is around 15 kilometers per day, 15 kilometers per day. Do you need 2 tons of materials to make these 15 kilometers per day? And that's, I think, some element that we will certainly discuss over these 2 days. New economy, power and sustainability. We speak about economy of scale. I will not speak about economy of scale, but economies of scope. I think that more and more we have the same platforms which allow to make savings and profits. The economies of scope, all the platforms that we can develop, and that's also thanks to the digital technologies, we should speak about economies of scope. And you have in many sectors, which could be the book, the leisure, touristic sector, these economy of scope which are possible. And then you have economies of network, which are also developing a lot, when you have finance, media, politics, philanthropy in the same package. I'm not saying that it's positive or negative, but I think that it's a fact which is developing a lot. If you take, and I will not give you some names, but you have really these economies of networks. And when you think on that, what about the shared responsibility or the concentration of power? Are we going in a more democratic system in many parts of the world, or are we going towards a concentration of power in just a few hands? Are we going to sustainability as an emblematic sector of co-creation, co-production, and co-innovation? And I think that sustainability maybe can be an emblematic sector for this co-creation, co-production, and co-innovation from which we are speaking very often. How can we imagine the EU socio-ecological transition? First, when we look at the future of work, I think that Europe is very well placed. When there is Simon Dolan, I think, from ESADE, will arrive tonight or tomorrow from EU Innovate. He made a nice paper on the future of work with some colleagues, and he tried to identify, based on scientific evidence, what we will need for the future worker, what kind of qualities we will need. Skills and education, attitude towards work and lifestyle, the cyber technology are more and more important. Then you will obviously still have the physical context of work and the social context of work. When you see this package of, let's say, qualities, characteristics of the future of work, I'm not sure that Europe is so badly placed. And I think that we have a certain future of work. When we look at the policy, in not many parts of the world, you have these targets. Juncker said yesterday that he wants to have binding targets for 2030, with 40% reduction of greenhouse gas reduction, 27% improvements of energy efficiency, and 27% of renewables. These targets, you can travel a lot around the world. You will probably not see that. Yeah, the next one. 2 emerging concepts, which I think also Europe is very well placed, is the individual empowerment and the collaborative economy. It's difficult to translate individual empowerment. I cannot translate that in French or Italian, which are my best language. Individual empowerment, where people feel really empowered. In English, it sounds well. It's difficult to translate. Empoderamiento individual, some Spanish could say that. Although it's, okay, it's a linguistic problem, but I think that this issue of individual empowerment is coming very strongly. And in the same time, we have more and more the idea of collaborative economy, shared economy. I was giving the example of Piazza, of networking, of collective work. In many education systems, they give more and more place to the team work rather than to individual knowledge, studying and repeating what the teacher has learned. Then I think this mixture of individual empowerment and collaborative economy are very strong, and Europe can have a very good role to play in this issue. What these new concepts have as a consequence for the nature, on the economic system, on public policy, and on infrastructure, I think that's a question maybe for a future research project, how these 2 notions can be tackled. Yeah, if I can ask, because I see that Alberto left. The next one, yeah, next. Yeah. This also, when we speak about innovation, in DG Research there are around 900 colleagues, and I think that 850 colleagues out of 900, when they speak about innovation, they think about technological and product innovation. That's what I think they have in mind. When I take a coffee with them, when I take a lunch with them, I say, what about innovation? What they have is technological innovation and a new product. While I always like to remember that there are many other. If you want to eat Nutella at 11 o'clock of the night, thanks to marketing innovation, you do that. No? Ferrero Rocher, you eat Nutella at 11 o'clock in the night. It's a marketing, but the way how it's presented, it's very nice, it's very good, it's sweet, but I mean, it's really a marketing innovation. Nothing is new in the product since decades. When you speak about organizational innovation, you have on the left, this is a picture from Volkswagen. They had so many accidents on the back. Many workers at 50 years had problem of the back because they had to be piegati, doblado, all the day. Now what they did, it's just they raise at 1 meter the cars. Then the worker has not anymore a back problem at 50 years. This is typically organization innovation. And then I'm sure that we will discuss, especially with the transit colleagues, about social innovation and user innovation. Next one, yeah. I like Latin, from proprietas to usus. I think the Romans have left a beautiful faro, no? You have un faro, no? The Hercules faro. In La Coruña, it's the oldest lighthouse, we call it. The oldest lighthouse in the world, which still functions. It dates from the Roman. And then the Roman had this idea of creating the terms proprietas. They invent that in the Roman law, you have the idea of proprietas. I am the owner of. This allows to solve many problems, because you know to whom it is the property, but in the same time, it is not at all an optimization of the products. How many times you use, if you cut your grass, if you have a garden, how many times you use it? One time every 15 days, in some country a little bit more, in some country a little bit less. But I mean, to use something half an hour every 15 days, it's not optimization of a product. And the same for cars, for bicycle, and many others. I am a civil servant. I always respect my time. And I would like to ask you if we can, Riccardo, going to the conclusions. In the slides number 36, poco más delante, 36. In terms of conclusion, we have many acronyms in Brussels. That's a little bit too far. I still have 2 minutes. I will use it, the 2 minutes. We have many acronyms. We have the NIMBY, not in my backyard. Many of you may know banana. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anybody. You knew that, no? If not, now you got it. I think that it's not bad. Huh? It's something which is appearing a lot in all the European Union countries. Whatever infrastructure, whatever things, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anybody. Then you have on the more, let's say, more constructive side, the KEFA, knowledge everywhere for anybody. This is very positive, which is quite true. You take a TED, you have to make, to learn whatever things, you get it, a very nice lecture by a very good professor. And then I invent one. I try, the acronym were used between glamours, between tests, pathway to have acronyms. BGOT, not God, GOT, beyond GDP, beyond, not beyond, that's the Chinese influence, beyond oil, and beyond tangibles. And I think that's a little bit our future, especially today we should discuss that. And I like also very much the expression of gardener of the planet. Today, and for many years, especially since the 80s, the man has been a little bit the shark of the planet, and I hope in the future that man will be the gardener of the planet. Thank you so much, and I will enjoy the discussion all the day.
Interesting and rich presentation. I would like to give time for a couple of questions from the audience. So if somebody of you want to say something. Tim Jordan?
Domenico Rossi knows what I'm going to tell him.
Can you, excuse me, Ting, excuse me, that you need your micro.
Ice cream.
Where is the micro, Adina? Right. Okay.
The contradiction in his presentation was like very different political meetings. And the picture of the two arrows going up and down, where you have the ideal society, a society which talks to each other, shares with each other, and is democratic. and also at the other hand you have an open political system which is interconnected. That's what Domenico is heading toward. But what happens if that society doesn't want to be sustainable? It doesn't want to cut its consumption. It does rather like its lifestyles of pleasure and luxury. In fact, the nature of inequality is driving people in two directions. One direction is toward greater consumption. The other direction is saying, I'm going to have something, even if I have to tear the earth with me, in order just to get something out of it before I get crushed. So the inequality and the whole issue associated with what you might call democratic procedures cut against what the whole idea of lifestyle change is about, unless you have a new form of social, moral learning, where people say, I should only consume, and I should only have a democracy where we share certain values which transcend the idea of non-sustainability. And I'm just wondering whether, from a Commission point of view, Domenico, this is something which you politicians, not you, but the politicians worry about, because in a way they're driven by what public opinion is asking of them, which may not be what the moral position should be for sustainability.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment.
Any other question or comment? Yes?
So, yeah, I detected a bit of a contradiction, or maybe sort of misuse of terminology when you talked about the shrinking Europe and the carbon emissions. So I think surely it's not that Europe is shrinking, but it's just growing proportionately less slowly. So I would like to see something changed around that. And also with the CO2 emissions, although Europe's percentage seems to be going down in actual terms, I think if you looked at that, it would still be more than the figure you gave in 2000. So maybe we can have a discussion about that.
Yeah. You're perfectly right. My comment was really to show how the role of Europe as a global actor is becoming smaller. And then the next part of my presentation was, but where Europe can play a strong role. And I think that I give many examples with the equilibrium between individual empowerment and collaborative economy, for example, which I see that as a very good point. When I spoke about the future of work, what you need for the future of workers, I try to illustrate some example where Europe can go ahead and can be a leading player in the world. But when I give the example of demography, economy, and CO2 emission, it's really a shrinking in relative terms of the European Union vis-à-vis its main other global actors.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so in order to follow the program, the agenda, we thank you, Domenico Rossetti, again for his presentation, and thank you also. I would like to say thank you also to Adina Dumitru and Nikki Francescati for the coordination that they did for mounting all this agenda that we are going to follow now. And also thank you for all the local team who helped us to mount all the meeting and all the, not only the scientific presentations, but also all the technical details and all the coordination activities that something like this needs. No?